So you may ask, what is the Neurodiversity Celebration Week and what is it all about? I'll be doing the explanation of that shortly. The Neurodiversity Week happened last week, March 13th to March 19th. The Neurodiversity Week was celebrated. Now, the Neurodiversity Celebration Week is a worldwide initiative that challenges stereotypes and misconceptions about autism and learning disabilities. The initiative has two aims. The first is to encourage schools to recognize the strengths and talents of neurodivergent students who think and learn differently, including students who are autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic, or who have ADHD. ADHD is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The second aim is to address the lack of training classroom teachers have in identifying and supporting their students with special educational needs by providing them with the kind of awareness I'm giving right now. So, Neurodiversity Celebration Week has started happening in 2018. So, this year makes it 5 years, and it has become bigger and bigger. And right now, over 20 charities and many organizations, including the United Nations Youth Envoy, is involved in the Neurodiversity Celebration Week. All right. The next part we'll be going to is understanding neurodiversity. So, what's this neurodiversity we are talking about? Neurodiversity is the concept that there are a variety of ways that people's brains process information, function, and present behaviorally. Rather than thinking there is something wrong or problematic when some people don't operate similarly to others, neurodiversity embraces all differences. The concept of neurodiversity recognizes that both brain function and behavioral traits are simply indicators of how diverse the human population is. The idea of neurodiversity also seeks to frame these differences as ones that are not inherently bad or a problem. Instead, it treats them in a more neutral manner and also highlights the many different ways that neurodivergence should be celebrated and how it can be beneficial. The term neurodiversity was coined by sociologist Judy Singer, who is autistic, in 1997. Neurodiversity can be broken down into two categories of people: those who are neurotypical and those who are neurodivergent. Now, this is telling us that neurodiversity is talking about the various ways people think. There is nothing like neurodiversity has made us believe that there is nothing like the normal brain. The normal does not exist, and people should not be stereotyped to a particular type of thinking or type of reasoning. So that is the reason neurodiversity came into play. Now let's discuss the neurotypical brain. The neurotypical is a descriptor that refers to someone who has the brain functions, behaviors, and processing considered standard or typical. That's what we call the normal brain. The brain we believe majority of people should have. The brain we've stereotyped to think is the perfect way of thinking. So, neurotypical people may have no idea they have because the subject has likely never come up for them before. These people usually hit all of their developmental and behavioral milestones at the same times and ages that are considered standard for most people. Once grown, they generally move through life without having to wonder if their brains function in the same way as others do. Like I've explained earlier, the neurotypical, from the word typical, that is the regular brain, belongs to people like what we say 70% of the world should have, where someone is behaving normal, somebody is behaving standard. The child ought to start walking at a certain age. The child ought to start talking at a certain age. That is what we term neurotypical brain. Under neurodiversity, that's what we term the typical brain or what you call the neurotypical brain. Everybody's kind of brain, the kind of brain everybody should have. Okay, neurodivergence. Neurodivergence is the term for people's brains function differently in one or more ways than is considered standard or typical. There are many different ways that neurodivergence manifests, ranging from very mild ways that most people would never notice to more obvious ways that lead to a person behaving differently than is standard in our society. We'll examine the most common types of neurodivergence and the ways they manifest ahead. So, neurodivergence, like the umbrella term neurodiversity, the word neurodivergent was also coined by sociologist Judith Singer. While originally used to refer specifically to people who are autistic, usage of the term has broadened significantly in years since. I had said it earlier that Judy Singer was the first person to coin the word neurodiversity. And because she was autistic, she is autistic, what you call the autistic warrior. That is, when you call someone an autistic warrior, the person has lived beyond autism and the label autism and has gone to do great works. Now, she was the one that also coined the word neurodivergent, neurotypical. Now, she was the one who did that. And before, neurodivergent was a term used to refer to anyone with autism. But now it has spread under a very wide umbrella to accommodate all other kind of behaviors that are not typical. Neurodivergence now refers to any structured, consistent way that brains work differently for a group of people that they do for the majority of others. Now, there are different types of neurodivergence. Now that we know what neurodiversity is, what brought about Neurodiversity Celebration Week, we know what neurodiversity is. We've been able to see how the brain has been categorized in two ways based on under neurodiversity. Let's now go into learning difficulty and learning disability. We'll first look at the meaning. What is learning disability? What is learning difficulty? Before we proceed, let us first shake a myth, that is a misconception or a false belief that has been on for many years. It was said in 2021 or 2020 thereabout that many people in Nigeria started learning, you know, the difference between both and accepting and breaking out of that myth. And that myth is that learning difficulty is the same as learning disability. Learning difficulty is not learning disability. Thank God for English. Let us break it. Learning. They both have learning in common. Now let's look at disability and difficulty. That is where the difference will come in. Now, what is disability? From defining the term in English, disability refers to, okay, when you say learning disability, when someone has a disability, is referring to someone that is not having the ability to do a certain thing. While difficulty is when someone is struggling to perform a task, you know, finding it very difficult to do a task. Let's look at the difference again. Disability is when someone is not having the ability to do a certain thing, while difficulty is when someone is struggling to perform a task. So difficulty can be placed alongside disorder. That is, difficulty and disorder can be placed alongside, but should not and cannot be placed alongside disability. Let me give this instance. A child who cannot see, that is visually impaired, let's say a blind child, has a disability, but a child who is short sighted has a difficulty. A child who is short sighted, not even children, even adults, we can use that term too. Any individual that is blind cannot see, you know. Let's give this instance: someone who was born blind cannot differentiate colors, cannot differentiate objects, cannot doesn't know what it feels or looks like, or doesn't have an idea. But someone who is short-sighted, long-sighted, is having a difficulty, short-sighted, inability to see things that are far, long-sighted, inability to see things that are close. So such people cannot be termed, you know, disabled, because with the aid of a glasses or a contact lens, they'll be able to see. They will not struggle. Like someone who is short-sighted might be squinting, and someone who is long-sighted might have to place whatever the person is looking at a bit farther from the eyes before the image can be accommodated on the retina. So that's quite different. So if you give a blind person, glasses to wear, the person would not be able to see still. So that person has a certain disability that deprives him of doing certain things. But someone who is struggling with hate would, be able to perform properly. And a disabled person, in that case, probably the person may need a surgery or anything like that. So that is differentiating between learning disability and what difficulty. Now, let me properly define it. Learning disability is when a person is less able or in a permanent stage or state of learning disadvantage. So, while learning difficulty is when a person is struggling to learn a certain thing. Now we can see the difference. So, when someone is facing difficulty, does not mean the person is incapable. The person has a capability, but maybe certain things are not working, you know, for the person. Maybe the person doesn't have the right resources or anything to help the person. Well, someone who is disabled cannot even do it. Okay, academically, the common types of learning difficulties include dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, visually processing issues, then apraxia. Those are the types of learning difficulty. But in this training, we are going to look at the most common learning difficulty. Now, let me repeat again, although there'll be a slide to show that. We have the dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, visual processing issues, then apraxia. Those are the common, or educationally, those ones associated with education, types of learning difficulty. For those of us that just joined, maybe that joined recently, this week, after celebrating the Neurodiversity Week, that was last week, 13th to 19th, 20th, which was Monday this week, we celebrated the DYS. This day, 20th March was the this day, was tagged the this day. And if you look at the types of learning difficulties that I listed, many of them have the this. Dyslexia has the DYS, dysgraphia has the DYS, dyscalculia has the DYS. So, what is this? Because we'll be going to the first and the most common learning difficulty known as dyslexia. This, DYS, is a medical term that connotes disability, difficulty, or inability. So it was borrowed, it was coined in the educational sector to explain some certain, learning difficulties common with individuals. For instance, the dis in dyslexia is a medical term that affects the brain, the part of the brain that processes language. That is dyslexia. So anyone with, when you want to define dyslexia, that is an inability or difficulty. If you coin it from the medical, difficulty for a part of the brain to process language. That is dyslexia.